Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. You found this podcast for a reason. You have a growth mindset, you want to learn and evolve, and you're making a difference by doing this work. I just want to say I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for showing up and being here and your willingness to expand and look within and see how you can evolve. And to me, that's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself and other people. I loved this episode because my guest started off doing his own therapy work and then decided, you know what? I really feel called to become a therapist. And so he talks about his journey on how his girlfriend originally wanted him to wanted him to go to therapy, and how he was all in his head and productivity was the name of the game. And he felt like if I'm not busy and I'm not producing, that I'm lazy. I think so many people, in particular men, can completely relate to this. I highly recommend you share this with somebody if you're in a relationship with them. If you have sons, if you have maybe some older grandsons, or anyone that's stuck in their head, share this episode with them. It is amazing. It's just a great episode. When I got off this interview, you're like, oh, that was such a good interview. So Jeremy Mohler is a therapist, men's group leader, writer, and author of the email newsletter, Make Men Emotional Again. He talks about how we all need to connect with emotions, in particular men. And I just want to say, it's never too late to begin this work. Truly, it's never too late to begin this work. So we talk about how to do that, how to connect to emotions. What are the keys to learning to connect to emotions again and getting out of your head and into your heart and expanding? I also have a journal that can help you with this. It's at Kristen, Kristen, Boyce, BOICE.com/free resources. You get it for free. You want to grab the journal and be on the mailing list because you don't miss an episode. I also try to send out good content, hopefully. This is the time. This is the time. Do not put it off doing your own work. Listen to this whole episode and decide you're going to take 2 things away and put them into action. Thank you for sharing this with other people, posting it on social media. We want to get the word out. We want to help more people connect emotionally. No more surface level. Let's go deeper. So let's jump into my conversation with Jeremy. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. I am so excited about this topic. I literally saw Jeremy and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to have him on because we need more room for men to connect with their emotions and reconnect with the essence of what creates healthy relationships. And when I have couples in my office, guess what the women want? They want emotional connection. And I take this even further. Every human on the planet, I believe, really craves emotional connection. So Jeremy, welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast.
I'm so happy to be here, Kristen. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited you're here in the midst of your move and getting everything ready and taking the time to join us today. Tell the audience a little bit about you and how you got so passionate about making the space for men to reconnect with emotions.
I love this question, and I'm going to try to keep it relatively short. But yeah, so I am a licensed therapist based in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm relatively new as a therapist. I like to really just kind of underscore that. I'm a couple years in being licensed and actually just started my private practice a couple weeks ago, in addition to moving into a new house. So there's a lot happening for me right now. But in terms of my journey and how I got here and how I specifically landed on working with men for the most part is I made a career change. It was actually my second career change. Third career, it's hard to keep track at this point. I was really inspired to work with clients using internal family systems therapy, IFS. It was what my therapist used with me years ago when I first started with therapy, and it just resonated in so many ways. I had been a meditation practitioner and eventually a meditation teacher before coming as a therapist. And yeah, something about IFS and mindfulness and meditation really clicked for me. So when I began this journey of being a therapist, I was like, I'll work with anyone, like whoever wants to work with IFS, like it doesn't matter as long as they're an adult. I knew I didn't want to work with children. So I was very, very open. And I think a lot of new therapists start that way, just like a wide net. I was afraid of not getting enough clients. And so I was like, yeah, I'll work with whoever. But at the practice I actually just left, yeah, just more and more men were coming to me. I was one of the two men that were at that practice out of 8 or 9 clinicians. And so it sort of made sense. Men were coming to therapy. They were Googling for therapy in Maryland. And then they saw our practice. And then they saw a few faces that sort of looked like them, that maybe had a similar experience to them. And I also had written in my bio that, and this is my journey in the beginning to get to therapy in the first place, was that I never thought I would go to therapy, but I was in a relationship and it wasn't going well. And my partner was like, hey, you should probably try therapy. Oh, work on some stuff. And I did it. I tried it and fell in love with it and became a therapist. So I think men were sort of connecting with that journey. And a lot of the men I see to this day are coming to therapy for the first time. Their partner, often a woman, is asking them or even maybe trying to force them to go to therapy because there's a relationship conflict and lack of connection. And it's a lot going on for the men in the relationship, and they're not necessarily working on it or looking inside or addressing it. So I sort of at first was reluctant to take on men as clients. I was like, I don't know, like what? I don't want to just focus on men or have too many men. I want it to be balanced. But I sort of fell in love with the work and started learning about myself through that work with men. And I started a men's therapy group, and that went really well. And started doing retreats for men over the last couple of years. Then I started a newsletter and starting to write about some of these issues with men that we face specifically. I know I'm saying a lot, but I just want to go back to something you said earlier, Kristen, around this essence inside about that we all have, regardless of our sort of outer appearance and experience and our identity. But I really truly believe that, oftentimes men come into my office and I perceive them in the beginning as a little resistant. It isn't always the case, but a little cold maybe, or just like, I don't know, a little distrusting. But over the course of a handful of sessions, I start seeing that inner essence come out, that wanting to connect, that ability to connect with me. And I just love watching that process play out and help men do that. So I loved how you said that earlier. That really fits with my experience.
Yes. I'm so glad you're doing this work. Why do you think men struggle with connecting to emotions? I mean, we look at upbringing, in my opinion, conditioned out of it. You got to be masculine, you got to be strong. Let's chat about that. Like, where do you think this disconnect from emotion starts?
Yeah. And I love how you just said, let's chat about it, because I don't have the exact answer. It's something I'm still trying to figure out myself. And I also, and this fits with the work with men and sort of that socialization, that learning that we pick up early on to be tough and be traditionally masculine. I don't want to pretend like I'm an expert here. There's a part of me that wants to be like, yeah, I've got the answer. I've got it all figured out. Here you go. But no, I'm figuring it out. Like I'm on a journey here with my clients and with other friends of mine. So sort of where my mind goes when you bring that up and ask that question is, and I don't remember the exact research here, but there was some research done. I think it was probably in the early 2000s. It was quite a bit ago, but yeah, it actually revealed that young babies, 6-month-old boys, are actually sometimes more, on average, more emotionally expressive than girls. I mean, those first few months, at least they're on par. They're the same. They're all human. They're all babies. But then within a few years, the boys start not expressing their emotions enough or as much as the girls. They sort of fall behind in that. I think it was like 3 or 4 years old, somewhere in there. So it's sort of pointing to that socialization process, that learning of like, let me not show that sadness, or let me not show that vulnerability as early as 3 or 4 years old. And that really just makes me so sad to hear that. Like, I have a nephew who's approaching 4 years old, and just thinking about him going through that process at school or watching at his tablet with YouTube or children's programming, and or interacting with adults and sort of getting that message early on that showing some of those more soft, sort of connecting emotions, those vulnerable emotions, can be scary, because you get maybe a response that says, hey, don't do that. Like kind of shames it out of them or shames it out of these boys. So there's some socialization process that's happening around that age, and then it continues. And I can certainly speak to that. I mean, I don't remember that far back, but I certainly remember 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old and just getting the message often from other boys to not hug or not shed a tear. Or, there was sort of a like, oh, you're soft, or you're like a girl if you do that, or you're gay if you do that. There was a shaming that happened there. I don't know why that's happening, and I'm really curious about why that happens, but there's so much research showing that it does happen.
It's heartbreaking because then they're set up
Yeah.
in these relationships and people want that emotional connection. And they're like, I
Mhm.
want to be able to offer it. I don't know how. Where does someone start to identify emotions, connect, be able to open up that more vulnerable place within them, especially for men? Where do they begin?
I think it starts with the body. I just think it starts with the body. I think when I first went to therapy, I'm thinking back on my story here. And again, my partner was like, hey, you should probably go to therapy. There's some stuff happening here that I'm not so happy with. And I did. And I went in very cognitive, like in my head, like, okay, I need to figure out what I need to figure out with this therapist so then I can go back to my partner and demonstrate whatever it is she needs for me to make her happy enough to then we'll stay together and I won't lose her. So it was very much like, let me figure it out in my mind what I need to say to my partner. I remember the first session though, it was like only 15, 20 minutes in. And I didn't know. I just sort of got matched with this therapist through a friend, like, hey, you should go to this therapist. And she was very somatic, very body based. Like she kept asking, what's going on in your body right now? Like in the first session, as I'm just talking and really in my head. I remember she said something back to me about what I've come to now learn about myself, that I have a very strong, loud part of myself that is about productivity, about getting things done, checking off the to do list, always working on something, never stop moving. If you do, you're going to be lazy and no one's going to want to be around you. Like there's a whole story there. So I was talking about that. Just, hey, here's where I work. Here's the work I do. And she was like, oh, it sounds like your family, I think I was talking about my parents. It sounds like your family really values hard work. Like she just said something very simple like that, just kind of, oh, here's an observation. And I remember it was like my body just relaxed, like, whoa, someone sees something about me that I can't see about myself. And then she's like, okay, what just happened in your body there? I was like, oh, well, my shoulders dropped. And it was like a new way of experiencing my experience. It was not in my head. It was in how does my body actually feel right now? What's going on in my shoulders? What's going on in my chest? What's going on in my stomach? Oh, there's some tension there. There's some tension in my neck. What happens when I relax that a little bit? That sort of thing. So I really think that doorway, that portal that is the body can then start to get us out of our head into what's happening when I'm relating to my partner. When I'm going to use she here, just because a lot of the men I work with are straight men in my experience too. She is like, hey, I want to connect with you more. What's going on for you? What's going on inside of you? What are you feeling right now? Instead of just trying to figure it out with her head, like, okay, let me just pause. Like, what's happening in my body? What do I feel right here? Let me just start there. I don't know. Oh, there's a feeling in my chest. And just, hey, there's a tension in my chest. That's all I know at the moment. I don't know what that is. Following that curiosity about the body, I think can get to the emotions eventually. It might take some practice. I often work with my clients over many sessions practicing that. I really do think it starts with the body, which is kind of a lot of people know and say that now. So, I'm not unique in that observation. And I think I've listened to some of your interviews and podcasts before this, and I know that you talk about the same thing. So,
I am so grateful you're sharing about getting out of your head because you were like, I'm going into there and I'm going to do the therapist. I'll do the checklist. Tell me what to say. Tell me what to do so I don't lose this relationship. So I please my partner. How many of us have done that? We're okay, I'll go in. I'll do the checklist. I just want my partner to be happy, but it's all in your head. I think this is a huge epidemic because we're not taught to connect to our body or emotions.
mhm.
So what do? We learn to go cognitive, go in our heads, go in our thought. And so you saying that you were in your head, I think is so validating to all of us at some level. And noticing when you're in your head versus how do you know you're not in your head? Can you speak into that? Like for people that are like, yeah, I'm in my head. How do I get out of my head? And how do I notice I'm in my head versus I'm not in my head?
Yeah, such a great question. And I'm not 100% solid on my answer yet when clients ask me this. But what I've been exploring with is, as I said before, mindfulness meditation for me has been so helpful. Oh, dropped my headphone. Has been so transformative for me. I started that journey before I went down the therapist sort of trauma healing path. And I remember just yeah, I mean, noticing my body for the first time, because that's a big part of the mindfulness practice, doing a body scan and checking in. What does my head feel like? What does my neck feel like? What does my shoulder feel like? And just bringing that attention inside to the body. I really kind of feel like as a therapist, I'm not very pushy on this. It's just a recommendation. It's an offer to my clients, but I really do think it's important to have some sort of, I think of it as maintenance, some sort of regular practice of tuning in, getting out of the, oh, let me look at the computer screen, let me do the work, let me watch the TV, let me get out in the car, let me drive, like that outer focus on the world, which we need to survive the day, but going inside for a little bit and just seeing what's happening in there. And so for me, it's like a daily meditation practice I do in the morning, which 10, 20 minutes of let me close my eyes and notice my breath and that sort of stuff. And then what's happening in my body. And I think that just sort of strengthens this muscle of like, let me turn towards myself in a moment where a lot of stuff's happening. Say I'm in an argument with my partner or someone just cut me off while I was driving and I'm so focused out there. But that muscle of like, no, let me check what's going on inside here in the body. What do I feel in my shoulders? What do I feel in my chest? It takes some practice, is what my experience has been. It's not something you can just will into being or sort of think through. It's a muscle that has to get developed for me and then many of my clients. So that's what I suggest is to just have some sort of practice. It could be a yoga practice, a stretching, something like that, where you're checking in with your body. It could be a walk where you're just noticing your feet on the floor, just all those sort of mindfulness practices to develop that muscle.
And to start really paying attention to it because our brains are we're conditioned to do what we've always done. So you're trying to disrupt that pattern and create a new kind of neural network, as we say,
Exactly.
a new pathway
Exactly.
to pay attention. The other thing that I thought you said that was so important and that I am grateful for you sharing, you're going to hear me say this a lot because I think productivity and the fear of you being perceived as lazy, that is so big. You said I would feel like being lazy if I'm not producing, if I'm not productive. And I think we all could feel that on some level, but men in particular are conditioned to achieve and success. And what are you contributing? What are you doing? Are you making the money? Are you talk a little bit about this idea of like you trying to work through this? Am I lazy? This lazy fear of being lazy and how that impacted you in this work to connect more emotionally.
Yes, there's so much coming up as you ask that question. This is really kind of right down the path of things I've been thinking about in my own journey and my growth and working with men. I want to name my newsletter right now, just to mention the name of it, not as necessarily a plug to like, go check it out, although that'd be awesome for folks to do that. But I ended up naming my newsletter Make Men Emotional Again, which is sort of a play, obviously, on, the political situation. But I named it that for a couple of reasons. One was what I was talking about earlier, where young boys start out emotional. They start out expressive. They start out able to connect as much as a baby is able to connect with their parents and others they trust. But then this socialization, this learning happens to where that stuff sort of gets hidden away, that essence that you were talking about earlier, Kristen. And so I'm kind of like, look, as men, we can go back to being that. We need to go back actually to that time. But the other reason I named it that is because as I've been reading about masculinity and researching and writing things for this newsletter, I've also found that so-called traditional masculinity, I'm putting that in quotes here, this idea of men are the providers, the protectors, that's their role. They're supposed to always be producing. They're supposed to bring the money in and provide for the family. That's actually not traditional. It's actually only a few hundred years old or so. Before that, throughout the world, and I'm not an anthropologist, but there were a number of different ways that men and women related and had different roles in different places in the world. It was only, again, a few hundred years of this idea that the man is the provider and the woman stays home and is the housewife and cares for the children and does quote unquote women's work. And I'm putting that in quotes. So I've really been inspired by what women have done over the last 50, 60 years or so, speaking particularly in like the US context here, the feminist movement of trying to expand the idea of what a woman is, right? And say it's not just about staying at home and caring for the children and being relational. And it's actually women, if they want to, can go out into the world and make money and provide and have a career and be successful while also doing that other stuff too, right? There's a full range of humanity there that I believe women should have access to. And I think that men have been similarly, a little differently, but similarly put in a box of this so-called traditional masculinity. And one aspect of that is that provider, protector, producer sort of. That's kind of like the one version of a man we can be at the end of the day. And I'm really passionate about expanding this idea that no, men actually can be relational. We can be nurturing. We can connect. We have that same essence that you were talking about earlier. It's just been sort of hidden away. We've been shamed into hiding it away. And so I really do think it fits hand in hand to bring it back to my own personal experience. If I look back at that relationship in my late 20s, where my partner was like, hey, you should go to therapy. And I ended up trying it and eventually falling in love with it, almost 24/7 focused on getting work done. Career was the most important thing to me. And I was unconscious of that. It was just, that's what matters. And then I had my partner. That's where I got my connection. And that's the other thing, the pattern I see with a lot of men, particularly straight men. We are so focused on career and producing and providing and being that sort of worthy man that we don't put a lot of energy, and we don't know how to develop really deep friendships and wide emotional support networks. So then we end up putting all of our emotional eggs in one basket, our relationship. And if we're straight, with a woman. And so that puts a lot of pressure on a relationship. It puts a lot of pressure on the partner to carry all, to be that place where I can go and soften and be held. If I have one person for that, I've just seen a lot of strain on relationships. It's not healthy for us to do that. I was so focused on providing and being that traditional man that I just didn't know how to connect in those other ways. And then my relationship ended. I went through a series of relationships where I was just always, even at dinner, looking at my phone, right at the email. Every once in a while, I'm under the table and I'm just not present, not emotionally present with my partner. And eventually they left me. And it sort of makes sense looking back.
Yes, you said so many good things that I want to dive into. Okay, nurturing, you use that word nurturing. And that word to me is significant because I think men are thirsty. The men I've worked with, let me reframe this. The men I have worked with in my office want other relationships with vulnerable men, and they are trying to find them, especially after they've done their own work. They're more aware of it than maybe because they're not pouring themselves into productivity as much or projects or distracting themselves. And now they're like, I want more vulnerable connection with men and have trouble finding it. Do you see that?
Yes, I do. And you're speaking my language too, or my experience. I'm pretty early on my journey here, and I'm a new therapist and I'm running men's groups and connecting with more therapists who are men. And every single one I talk to, we start talking about this sort of thing. And they're like, oh, I'm dying for more connection like this. These are therapists who are doing this work. They've been doing it a long time in some cases. And they feel isolated as men within that community. One thing I'm trying to do is set up some social events for men who are therapists or healing professionals. I co-led my first retreat for men who are therapists a few months ago. And there were some men in their 50s who were just dying for this connection. And these are men who've done a lot of that work, like you're talking about. And I think I really resonate with what you said. The more I've been able to work with that part of myself that is so focused on productivity and be able to sort of negotiate with that part and say, okay, yeah, today's Monday. Let's go. Let's get some stuff done. Let's work. But 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock comes around. I feel that part still saying in my mind and in my body, all right, there's still more stuff. There's more stuff on your to-do list. You could make more money. You need to pay the bills and your
Oh,
partner will be happy. Like that whole story. I'm like, okay, hey, like we can get some rest. We can hit it again tomorrow on Tuesday morning. But I want to have dinner with my partner now. I want to be present. And so that part is able to kind of step back a little bit and allow me to do that. But before that, it was just, I'd be still in that, just keep going and keep going. But now that I've been able to get it to step back to your point, okay, now I want to connect. I want to be with my partner. I want to hang with some friends. That's what I want. I'm someone who is a little avoidant and I'm pretty shy and like likes to spend a lot of time by myself. I'm a little introverted, but I'm learning that now if that productivity, that overachiever gets stuff done, once that calms down and quiets down inside, I'm like, I want connection. I want to be with people, that deep connection. So resonating with your experience
yes.
or what you said. Yeah.
And I think the nurturing, it was there and then it got buried. And I feel like that is a word that just sticks out with the lack of nurturing men either got or didn't get or disconnect from. What are your thoughts on that? Because you specifically said nurturing.
One thing that comes to mind is I'm working my way through a book right now that's really blowing my mind and my heart open. It's called Father Time. I think it came out last year. I don't remember her name, but she's a longtime anthropologist, has done so much work on particularly primates, monkeys, studying gender. But she wrote a book called Father Time about how human men, we actually produce the same hormones that women do right after pregnancy, after having a child. If we're holding a baby, a newborn, the same thing happens in our body, the same hormones. So we have that nurturing ability inside of us, biologically speaking, let alone just emotionally, like as human beings. It's in there, just like you said. The other thing that came to mind is that I'm learning about nervous system regulation and how we connect with ourselves and how we connect with other people and the different ways that different people do that. I have a theory that a lot of men, especially myself, through that process we've been talking about early in life, where the sort of vulnerability and the nurturing is shamed out of us, we often then go to self-regulation. So we find ways to regulate our nervous system just by ourselves, whether that's drinking alcohol or playing video games or watching Netflix, doing something on our own. And I find that, and this is a really broad brush that I'm painting with here, but a lot of women are socialized in the other direction. Regulate your nervous system by connecting and talking with other people, usually other women friends. Let's connect. Let's work this out together. Men are sort of, I'm going to work it out by myself or just ignore it or drown it out. I really find that our muscle of nurturing, of connecting with others, being there for someone else, having them be there for us is so undeveloped. And we just need so much practice at it. And yeah, I'm still early in my journey on that, but I think I'm starting to get this sense of like, you know what, if I feel dysregulated, if I feel tension in my body, if I feel off, if I feel I'm in a difficult mood, tough mood, feeling depressed, anxious, I have my meditation, I have my things I do on my own, but I also now have another tool. I can go talk to someone about it. And that oftentimes is going to help me if I trust them, if I feel safe with them, like my partner or close friends. So just to have that other tool to be able to nurture and be nurtured is, I just want more options like that.
That's why I love you're doing groups and you're doing retreats. My husband, if he's having a bad day, okay, he's just stressed. We're stressed. He's having a bad day. And he's like, I'm fine. Feelings inside not expressed. Okay. Because that's what we learn.
I like
And I
that.
think, especially for men, I'm fine. I'm good. And I'm like, I can just see his body. He's not. And I just hold the space. And it's like, and he is able to talk and process. He's like a new person. It's like we all need this space. And especially men that didn't learn, to your point, this is women kind of go and talk with their friends, and men are supposed to have it together. They're supposed to not be too emotional. So when you say this, when you're talking about this and this ability to actually be vulnerable because you've been shamed, men have been shamed out of it, men start doing that. I mean, this is a big deal to do.
Well, I'm a therapist, so I'm going to say go to therapy.
Yes.
Go to therapy. But there are some other things. I think that There's another option that I really like, which is joining a men's group, which doesn't necessarily have to be run by a therapist or be sort of particularly therapeutic, but getting with other men who are, whether it's reading books together about masculinity or about some of this emotional regulation stuff we've been talking about, or just getting together to share, hey, here's what's going on for me this week. Here's my struggle. I find that in men's groups and working with men in particular, oftentimes, not always the case, that some structure is important. So some sort of, here's what we're going to do when we meet our men's group every week. Like get with some of your friends and say, hey, every week we're going to start off by saying each of us share one struggle we're dealing with right now, one challenge. It could be in the relationship, it could be at work. And then one thing we're really grateful for, one thing we're really fired up about. Like just have a little like sort of prompt there and have everyone go around and check in and share about that and then sort of let the conversation develop. But that's something that has been helpful for me at times, that men's group. I've had a men's group that's been going for years. So I really like that too. Yeah, I guess I want to say overall, find that going back to that like self-regulation, like I'm going to figure it out on my own stuff that a lot of men can get into. We can spend many years like reading books and listening to podcasts and trying to like figure it out and piece it together by ourselves. And I find that for men in particular, as uncomfortable as it can feel, talking with other people, finding a men's group, finding a therapist, joining a men's therapy group or a therapy group in general, just getting with other people, I think can make like a huge difference, particularly for men compared to spending years sort of thinking about it, reading books and like, oh, I should do that, or I need to do it this way. That can be helpful, right? This podcast can be extremely helpful as an additional piece here, but go talk to somebody.
I agree. I think that's really helpful. You talked about, I think, this idea for men that for you guys, I mean, that you can be avoidant. I mean, not all men are avoidant, but you mentioned that, like you are avoidant. Can you share more about that? Because that comes up a ton in therapy, this avoidance name, or you're avoiding. Can you expand on that? What are you avoiding and how did that get developed? Maybe not. We kind of touched on that, but really, what are you avoiding and how did you work through that? And how do you work through that?
Yeah. And I love thinking and talking about avoidance and the different sort of attachment styles that we have. And I'm not an expert on attachment theory, but one of the styles is avoidant attachment style. And the more I read about that and listened to podcasts about it and talked to people about it, I was like, oh, that's me. That's how I am. And where it resonated for me was the sense of feeling overwhelmed when someone was trying to emotionally connect with me, when someone was asking me about, how are you doing? And maybe I would say, fine. I love that acronym, the way you laid that out earlier. It was kind of like, get away. Don't go there. I'm fine. I've learned actually as a therapist that I often would shift it back. Often will want to be like, okay, well, what's going on for you? You talk, you share all the stuff, and I'll just kind of sit over here and listen and be in my own head. So there's something about like the way I describe it for myself is like almost like a magnet or two magnets that have been sort of switched where it pushes away. I don't know some sort of polarity there where it's like pushing away. And I feel like when my partner wants to connect with me emotionally, particularly like in the middle of a work day, if I work from home, so I go downstairs and she's in the kitchen and she's like, oh, hey, da 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 da, here's what's going on, or what's going on with you. And I'm like, like there's like get away, like a pushing away that happens. And like I said earlier, just investigating that in my body. What is that feeling like? What does it feel like? I did this in therapy with my therapist, right? And is there an image that you see as my therapist asked me, is there an image that you see when you imagine that pulling away inside of you? What's that look like to you in your imagination? I just sort of visualized this part and sort of worked through it and got to know it. And eventually just having that awareness is huge first step, let alone trying to figure out where it came from and all that. Because now when I'm feeling that around my partner, I can identify, oh, there's that pushing away, avoidant part of me in my body. I feel it. And then I can tell her, I can say, hey, I recognize that you're trying to connect right now, or like you want to spend some time with me. I'm feeling in my body like pushing away. We actually joke about it a lot. We have animal names for it and stuff that are like kind of like, get away from me. So I'm able to even like kind of joke about it a little bit with her. And then she can understand, oh, that's just where you're at right now. Maybe this isn't the time to connect. Like it gives her a choice, right? To be able to connect with me or not in that moment. And I often will tell her, maybe later tonight, I'll be more available. And right now I've got this project I've got this podcast I need to prepare for with Kristen. I'm thinking about it. So, get away from me. So just being able to communicate that with my partner, even in a humorous way, it just softens that so much. She doesn't get as defensive or upset or wanting to connect with me more. That's what I do with it.
And I think you're owning it. When you are, I think that's a huge part of growing and evolving is being able to own your own experience and your own body sensations. Like you're saying, I'm noticing, I'm curious, and I'm communicating. And that's my way of taking ownership for where I am. And I think that disarms people and that creates more ability to connect and more emotional availability.
Yes, exactly. I'm in a number of group therapy groups. As a client, I'm in a group. And what I've learned in that is that when people are able to own it that way, even like anger, like, hey, I'm feeling angry at you right now for what you just said. As long as there's some trust and safety in that relationship that's been built, when they own it and say it rather than it's just in their body and they don't know it's there, and maybe it's starting to come out through their voice and the way they're talking, I don't get as scared. Parts of me don't get as activated and on defense because that person's owning it. And it sort of makes sense. If someone's like, I'm fine, and they're not aware of what's happening in their body, you don't know what that person's going to do, right? Like if they're not aware of what's going on, they might explode or who knows what they're going to do. They might run away and leave. Like there's so much uncertainty in that situation. And I think our nervous system picks up on that. So if someone can own it, like you said, and communicate it, it allows us to be like, oh, okay, like I can trust this person a little bit right now and be with them and whatever they're doing, even if they're angry at us.
Yeah, because our nervous system can go, "Ah, okay, I know where they stand.
Exactly.
I know where they are."
Yes,
And we don't
exactly.
have to
Because
feel
they
like
know
this
where they are.
because they know where they are. And when you're
Yeah.
aware of where you are, it's such a permission slip.
Yes.
It calms it calms your own nervous system and it calms others. It creates a
Yeah.
healthier, more regulated system, I feel like.
hmm Yeah. That co-regulation between the two nervous systems rather than I got to figure it all out on my own. I'm fine. And like, let me
And I'm in my
go,
head. I'm in my head.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that is just being in your head, I think is a relationship killer. I
hmm
said it.
hmm
I
I
do.
agree.
I think
I
it's just a
agree.
relationship killer. Over and over, I've seen it. I'm like, and then when men and who it doesn't matter, but whoever the person is that discovers, oh, this feels so much better to not be in my head and learning how to get out of the head into the body is the freedom. It's like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible. And then they can have a relationship with themselves and then they have a healthier relationship moving forward. I mean, it really changes the game.
Exactly. That healthier relationship you just said, like when I'm able to tap into my body and notice, hey, there's something here when I'm with my partner, like I'm holding on to something, there's some tension somewhere. Let me get curious about that with her. What's going on between, what's here? Then that usually points us to something we need to talk about or something we haven't been talking about that needs to be talked about. We clear that up, we get through that, and then the relationship feels so much better. Like we're at like another level. We've leveled up in terms of our connection and intimacy because we addressed whatever that thing was between us and our bodies. Not just like, let's just talk about it in our head and stay up here. It's like, let's figure out what's going on here, what's in between. And then that you did, that big breath, like
Yeah.
that's what I want. That's what I want to feel like more often.
You have a partner that's willing to do that. And I think that's such
Exactly.
a gift.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah,
do
she's
this
amazing.
work, you source that person. I really believe that. That also is at that same willingness to grow and wants that just as much as you do. I think that. And so I'm like, people don't be afraid to ask questions to the person you're dating. Do they want to do this work? Are they willing to go to therapy? 2 months into dating my husband, I was like, how about premarital counseling? I was like, you think this is a relationship? And that's what we did. We did an Imago retreat and it was the best thing ever. I mean, because it was set the tone for our relationship that we're both in this growth mindset. And I think for men in particular, being exposed to going to a therapist and learning this, then you get to create the relationship you want and
Mm.
feel. I definitely think that's what you give yourself.
You just named my story. Like that's exactly what it is. I have the relationship I've always wanted now. And not that the people I dated before weren't amazing people, they're amazing, but I have the relationship I've always wanted. And it's because I went to therapy. and learned how to connect with my therapist first in this way. And then I joined a group and I learned how to connect in that way with them. And then I met my now wife. And just like you did, I was like, hey, why don't we went to an IFS retreat together? And she absolutely loved it. It was amazing. Like it was so great. And that just built that sort of foundation as you talked about for us. And just getting better and better all the time.
That's what soul connection is. I think you're just on this evolution of expansion and growth together with yourself and with your partner. There's so much we could talk about. Like, I want to keep talking. I'm like, we could go on and on because it's such a great, necessary conversation. I have a question. That's one of my favorite questions. What book has made, you mentioned the book Father Time that you're reading now, but what book has made the most impact on your growth journey? And I know this is a big question. And you can.
I know there's so many.
Yes.
But actually there aren't that many for men. I'm finding that. So I'm like, part of me is like, I need to write a book about this stuff. But
Yes.
yeah, there's a book called The Will to Change, and it's by Bell Hooks. And it's probably the most recommended that I see for men who are trying to work on this sort of stuff and investigate their own masculinity and the messages they received as a child. But I just really love the way that she talks about her own experience with her father. And then she just has so much compassion for men, even though she's sort of holding us accountable at the same time and demanding more from us, right, to do this work. But she also just has so much love and compassion for what we've been through from the very beginning of life, that sort of socialization process we talked about, all that shame that we carry. It spoke to my heart so much, and I would definitely recommend that one.
I definitely think you need to write a book. And your book title can be the name of your Substack, Make Men Emotional Again, because we're in a time where craving this. I think men want more. I think they just don't even know it's available, but the relationship will push them. That's usually when they're in my office. Typically, it's because of that. And now is the time. So I am so grateful for your work and what you're doing in the world. And I know you're at the beginning and it's just beginning. You're on a mission. I really feel like that. Is there anything you wanted to share that we didn't talk about that you thought was important as it relates to making men emotional again?
Yeah, I guess just one other thing. I think we covered so much and then there's so much more to talk about too, but I just really love how this conversation has sort of woven through the various aspects of this work. I'm coming from a certain perspective as a therapist, the internal family systems perspective of that we are made up of parts, that we have parts of us that are not all our whole self. And so I just really wanted to get across here that the aspects of ourselves as men, some of the things we learn, say maybe not being able to tap into our vulnerability and express that vulnerability and those kind of softer emotions and those more nurturing and connecting emotions, and really only kind of being able to go to anger often feels like the one note we have to play. That anger can be harmful, can be hurtful, can cause damage to relationships. There's things that we can do with that anger that we end up regretting and feeling very shameful of and feeling guilty of. But that's a part of us. That part of us that maybe leads to angry outbursts, that's just a part. It's not all of us. It's not all of you. And so I just say that to help sort of get rid of some of that shame, hopefully, about some of the things we may have done or the things we do in relationships, or as men, maybe it's drinking or whatever it is to numb out the emotions. It's just a part of us that's getting us to do that. There's other parts of us. There's a essence underneath, to use your word earlier, that really does want to connect and not harm other people and be with ourselves and nurture. So just wanted to throw that in there.
I think that's a really important point. If people are like, I love Jeremy's work and I want to know where to find him, how can they find you? And do you do groups online? I know that's going to be a question for men. Like if they want to join one of your groups, can they do that? Yeah. Is it online or how does that all work?
Yes. So if they happen to be in Maryland, they could reach out to me. My website's jeremymohler.blog. They can email me and we can find a way to find them a therapist if they need help finding a therapist, or if they want to find a men's group, I can help them with that. So I've got Maryland covered in that way. But if they're outside of Maryland, I would check out makemenemotionalagain.com, which is my newsletter, and they can subscribe for free to that. I also have gatherings online through that for men to have these kind of conversations. So yeah, there's a couple different ways to connect, but they can be anywhere in the world for that one.
Perfect. Because I know there's lots of listeners and some of my clients that are like, I've been craving having more deeper conversations, more heartfelt, authentic, emotional conversations. And I think there's a place for this work. I really do. So thank you for bringing this into the world. And I am grateful for your time today, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
I so appreciate you, Kristen, setting up this podcast and having folks on and having this conversation. I just want to keep chatting with you. So yeah, it feels really good. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, Kristen, Boyce, BOICE.com. Thanks and have a great day.